There are certain things that you do in every one of your games that stop you from going to the higher level. In this video I'm gonna share with you so many common mistakes that my students of this level are making that you should avoid making to finally break through and get over 1500 ELO. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. So today we are gonna play against Wally, who is a 1800 rated chess bot, but of course those chess bots, they don't play as good as their level says. I don't know for what reason. Anyway, I'm gonna play a game against Wally, and I'm gonna comment all of my decisions and explain you what people of your level are doing wrong throughout the chess game, and of course how to do it the right way. So first of all, when we start the game, we want to achieve three things in the first stage of the game, which is called opening. We want to develop all of our pieces, we want to bring it into the game so we are ready for the real fight. We want to fight for the center because center is the most important part of the game where all of the main actions are happening. And finally, the third one, we want to make sure that our king is safe, so bring it to the safety zone. Now it can, of course, be different. Sometimes you want to bring it to the king side, that is the most normal way of happening. Sometimes, although, you go to the queen side because there the king is safer. So castles is just a instrument to achieve that safety zone for your king. It's like your child that you need to take care of before you can go to work and achieve your business goals, which are give a checkmate to your opponent. Okay, so the golden rule to achieve that, like the developing of your pieces, is one piece, one move. This is what so many players, including my students, unfortunately, sometimes do absolutely wrong. They're bringing a few of their pieces into the game, and then they're starting to create something out of it, create some threads, I don't know, just start playing. This is their own strategy. Why? Because you're basically playing with a few of your pieces against the whole pieces of your opponent. He has so many, and if you just start to play with a few of them, then you are having a huge disadvantage. Okay, let's play the move c4, because this way we are controlling a lot of space in the center. Let's see what our opponent is doing, because d6 is an interesting move. Okay, now he plays g6, which is an indicator that he's going for a King's Indian defense. That's actually going to be very interesting, because the point of this opening is that black is at least temporarily give the full control of the center to white side, and then they want to attack it later on. Well, I can play e4, that is the main line, but I really like this move g3 and just bringing my bishop to the g2 to control the whole diagonal. I feel like that is a very, very powerful piece, and if I play the move e4, at least early, then I'm gonna block this diagonal so that the bishop won't be that great there anymore. Nevertheless, you notice that both of us so far are following this one piece, one move rule. That is the golden principle. Of course, if your opponent is attacking your piece with like a pawn, you cannot just ignore it and say, well, I am not allowed to make a second move with the same piece. Of course, you have to be reasonable about that. But what I mean with this principle is that voluntarily you should try to never make a second move with the same piece that has already moved before you have developed all of them. Okay, knight to g7. Then once, well, towards the end of the opening, you need to come up with a plan for the game. That's very important. That is what differentiates a weaker chess player from a stronger one. A stronger one has really a structure, a certain system to how he handles the chess game. He has a certain plan. For example, here, white can play in the center, try to launch some attack here. White can play here on the queen side, but like simultaneously, if you do that, then it feels kind of chaotic, and you cannot really achieve, you cannot be both efficient on both sides of the board simultaneously. Sometimes when you have a huge space advantage, even that is possible, but generally you need to have one strategic plan and then you try to execute it. Of course, you take into account what your opponent is doing, that is essential, but you have your own plan. For example, here I really want to play for the center. So I want to play rook e1, develop another piece, and I want to play e4, and if my opponent allows me, even e5 and grab the whole space in the center. Okay, my opponent is playing knight to b6, and that is another golden principle I want to share with you. So many low-rated players are doing it the wrong way. Even if they think, okay, I have a plan, I want to play in the center, they kind of ignore what their opponent wants to do. They're like, okay, that's my play, I'm just doing it. But the problem is you never play chess alone. You have your opponent who has his dreams, hopes, and threats, and you absolutely have to acknowledge that. For example, my opponent makes here the move knight b6. I have to, for 1 second, just completely forget about all of my ideas and think what my opponent wants to achieve. And he obviously attacks this pawn. So first of all, you need to think about forcing moves, checks, captures, and threats. Not only for yourself, but also for your opponent. So this pawn is hanging, I don't want to lose it, but I have a perfect way to protect it, the move b3. Now this knight is very, very restricted, and I also have a b2 square for my bishop, so that I have this double fianchetto, and I'm gonna control a lot of squares over there. Okay, he plays d5, which actually makes a lot of sense, because it makes my plan more difficult. But he also loses so much time. I don't think this strategy can be that good. So I now basically have a choice between defending the pawn and just playing c5. I really tend towards playing c5 because that means, notice that my opponent made another move with the knight, and now after c5 he needs to make a third one and go back, where he's gonna block his bishop. But he does get some strategic advantage to that because the pawns, they're not moving back. So on c5 I will no longer put any pressure on the d5 pawn, and he's gonna be able to prepare the breakthrough in the center of the move e5. Well, the way to defend it wouldn't be probably queen to d3, because then he's gonna play bishop f5. That's once again another golden principle for you. Never make a move unless you have thought about your opponent's answer. So many players are only focused. I notice it so much with my students, and that is why they can't reach the next level. They are so focused on their plans. They're like, I want to go here, then I want to go that, and that's good. But you absolutely have to think what your opponent is going to answer. I can play queen d3 here with the idea to play e4, and it all seems so great. But unfortunately, my opponent can immediately play bishop f5, and that would destroy, absolutely ruin all of my plans. I don't like it. So another way to defend it is to play knight to e5. That one I like much more because it's an active move. The knight is protected there, the pawn on c4 is also protected, and that feels pretty active. Although once again I have to think what my opponent can do. He can play something like f4. Knight to g4. I'm thinking about the move f4 for me, but the problem is he can exchange the knights and then the c4 pawn would be hanging. So the ideal plan would be for me to play knight e5, then to play c5, and then to play f4 to establish my knight there on e5. But I don't think I can achieve all of that, because if I play knight e5, he plays knight g4 immediately. Now if I play c5, he can play knight takes e5. But I can take on b6, and this knight is hanging, goes somewhere. I take on a7, and then I can play e4 and maybe still attack in the center, although it puts pressure on my d4 pawn. So there is no guarantee it's going to be that great. And if I take on g4 first, then just bishop takes, and once again, doesn't have that many problems with the development. Knight d2 is another way, but it's a move backwards, and the d4 pawn would be under attack if he takes on c4, for example. I can take with the knight though, of course. This video is brought to you by Chestnut. Chestnut is making amazing chessboards that allow you to play online from a real 3D board. They have high quality chessboards, nice looking chess pieces, so that you can enjoy and having fun playing it. Chestnut boards also have so many training functions that I absolutely love to use to my training, and it helps me to improve my chess every day. This is, for example, Chestnut ELO. I love to use it for my trainings, but they have so much to offer you depending on your preferences and your budget. And the best part is you can just use the promo code Journey to Grandmaster or click the link in the description to get a big discount on all of the Chestnut products. Yeah, I like the move c5 is the most active move here. I guess I'm gonna play c5. Like I said, I really like to make those moves that are attacking. what? Knight to e4. That just interrupted all of my thought process. But like if he would just play knight to d7, then it's a rather passive move. He wastes a lot of time, and that generally cannot be bad for me. I was planning to play bishop f4, continue my development. But knight e4, that is actually something I completely missed. And you shouldn't do that. You should think about your opponent's moves. You shouldn't be like, okay, I'm attacking the knight, so he must go back. It's not checkers. He is not obliged to do that. He also has another opportunity. But somehow I find it hard to believe it can work. Because his knight is hanging over there, I can take here, and then the idea is he takes back and he is attacking the d4 pawn, and unfortunately I haven't played bishop to b2 yet. I guess in this variation rook e1 was too slow. Maybe I had to develop my bishop instead. Okay, but what can I do? First of all, it's not like a big deal. I can just defend my knight on c3 with the bishop, and that would be just an exchange. But of course, if my opponent has some space problems, then exchanging the pieces is good for him, is beneficial for him. The problem is if I play like knight takes e4, pawn takes knight g5, that would be desirable, but he has an intermezzo. He wouldn't play like knight d7 or even knight d5. In that case, I would just win a pawn. But he's gonna take on d4 first, and that would attack my rook. That is quite unfortunate. So I don't really want to take on a4 and open up his queen, give him the d5 square. I don't feel like it's such a great option. Yeah, knight e4 is actually a good move. Pity that I have missed it. Okay, another chance I have is to take on b6. He takes on c3. I play queen c2. His knight is hanging, so basically has to go back. Then I can take on a7, but it's not like, once again, I'm achieving much. Interesting. I really like what my opponent did here. So I guess I'm gonna play bishop b2, because that is consistent with our system. I develop yet another piece. Okay, he just goes to d7 without taking it. That makes sense, but now I have more... like, it feels to be more promising for me to exchange on e4 now, because this pawn is going to be hanging, his bishop is closed, and I feel like it's going to be a little bit annoying. But now I notice what I have missed previously, and that's very important. That's the reason why you calculate those variations before making your move. After knight takes c4, pawn takes, and something like knight g5, he has this move knight takes c5 because of the spin. And he is threatening, by the way, here, just knight takes c3, bishop takes, and knight c5, or knight c5 immediately for that reason. That means that all doesn't work. So maybe I just play queen c2. Attacking that knight, yeah, developing yet a new piece, and protecting against that threat, knight takes c5. I also protect my knight on c3, which is very important. Okay, he actually plays knight f6. Yeah, that I'm not sure I'm a big fan of, because like this knight is making 1, 2, 3, 4 moves now. It's move number 12, and he's making 4 moves with the same knight. It's generally not a good strategy. Of course, there can be exceptions. You can find some Magnus Carlsen game when he makes a lot of moves with the same knight and he's successful with that. Well, he is allowed to do whatever he wants. He's Magnus Carlsen. You, on the other hand, normally if you're gonna do something like that, it's not gonna end well. And in 99% of the cases, the strategy with one piece and one move would really be very beneficial for you. But I do see the point. He wants to play bishop f5, and then my queen would be, yeah, kind of unfortunate. So that makes me think that maybe I want to play rook d1, bishop f5, and just queen c1, so that I no longer have this very, very annoying pin there. Knight e5 seems like the active move you want to make, but bishop f5... yeah, bishop f5 is pretty annoying. If I play queen to c1, then I'm blocking my own rook, which is not great. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, let's continue our system and just develop all of our pieces. If you notice, now I have made at least one move with every single one of my pieces. That is what I want you to achieve. Yes, my opponent also has his advantages. We are gonna try to deal with that. Queen c1, that is the first moment in the game I am making a second move with the same piece. Once all of your pieces are developed, you are allowed to do that. Yeah, I was kind of afraid of that, because now he's attacking my f2 pawn. But I thought I can always just exchange that guy on e4 and It's not a big deal. I don't think that way. Although maybe at some point something like e3 would be annoying, like knight x e4, d takes, something like knight h4 seems to be logical, because if the bishop goes away, e4 is hanging, and if not, I'm just taking it. But maybe he wants to play e3. And if I play f3, seems to be logical, he has knight f2, and then my rook is hanging, and there is no squares for my rook to go. So on e3 I can just take it, but then maybe bishop h6, attacking that guy, and that is very dangerous. Although, yeah, I don't have it. Yeah, that is quite annoying, this e3 move. Okay, what is the threat here? Knight xf2. I can, of course, play rook f1, but that's not really something you want to play. And I also can sacrifice in exchange, because after knight x4, pawn takes, knight h4, e3, I can just play maybe f4, not e3. And then if knight f2, I can just take on f5, pawn takes, queen takes e3, knight x d1, rook takes. I have one pawn for the exchange, and I have two bishops. And I think that I have a perfect development, so I'm gonna have a lot of interesting opportunities over the king side, for example. That feels to be interesting. Bishop and pawn against the rook is almost enough to compensate, especially since there are no open files, so that the rooks are not that aggressive. Because, yeah, I really don't want to play rook f1, although that's quite a normal move. Let me take. Bishop take. Okay, he's not going for that at all. I mean, this also makes some sense. His pawn structure is still very stable. But now I can just push his pieces back, like just play h3. What are you gonna do? Yes, you have the move bishop h6, but I don't think it's that dangerous for me. I can even just go away with the queen. But I like the move h3 because it's pushing the knight back, then the e5 square is available for me. Or maybe, yeah, I'm now realizing I missed this interesting idea to play bishop h3. And then I want to get rid of this bishop. I want to play knight g5 and attack the bishop. And instead of exchanging it, I can just win it, like exchange my knight for it. Okay, that's gone now, but I can still play knight to e5. And I still feel like I'm more active here. I have a better development because those rooks are still not taking part in the game. e2, takes. And I guess I have to play here in the center still f3, e4, like that. I have to be a little bit careful though, because if I exchange a lot of pieces, then I'm left with this bishop against this bishop, and I have my pawns on the dark squares. It's usually not a great strategy because it limits my bishop's potential, and those pawns can be a target for my opponent's bishop. Okay, do I play f3 here? Bishop takes e5, I can just take on e4. And then I have e5, and then I'm grabbing a lot of space. Can still play f6 though. And if I play knight d3 with an idea to play f3 and e4, I don't really see how he can stop that. He can play f5, but that is also some kind of weaknesses. Yeah, I like the move knight d3. Very stable here. He's still like, he's making a lot of pieces, a lot of moves with the same piece. I'm kind of doing the same, but I'm achieving some progress. Wait, knight g5 is not possible. Yeah, I guess. I can safely play f3, get the knight away. Once again, he's wasting a lot of time. By the way, now I can just play knight e5 back with the tempo attacking that queen, so I don't like this move queen to d7. Actually, my idea was to play e4. The question is whether I play knight e5 first or not. Normally, you want to leave those tempo moves for the future, and I don't really see any problems with the move e4. I'm basically controlling the whole center. Yes, the d4 pawn would be a little bit vulnerable, but I have my rook here. Yeah, I feel now like I definitely control here most of the space. And this knight I'm not entirely sure where it should go. Maybe it should go to f4 and play d5. Support it. Because yes, I have this huge center, but the question is how do I use it? Or maybe I play queen to f4 and then knight e5, and then somehow that would be a little bit annoying for him to protect this f7 pawn. Because yeah, he basically wants to play knight h5 at some point or something similar and attack my d4 pawn. On the other hand, it's very difficult for him to take this pawn because that would be a pin, rook against queen. One thing you never want to make in such a position is to play the move e5, because that would weaken this diagonal, that would destroy this bishop. Like, the best move for me would be to play d5. That would open up the bishop, and yeah, I'm going forward, I'm attacking. But unfortunately now he has too many defenders. That is why I'm thinking about this move, knight f4. But might have bishop h6 there. I can play queen c4 though. Have to be a little bit careful not to get into trouble there. Bishop takes f4, pawn takes knight h5, something like that. Like, you always have to be careful with your opponent's counterplay. But I feel like I would be in time to play rook f1, just defend it, and then f5, d5, everything is coming. What is wrong with starting with queen c4, by the way? Because I'm also kind of threatening knight e5, attacking f7 and d7. I like it. Yeah. Maybe he still plays knight h5, but in this case I have the move g4, pushing him back. I like it. Something like b5, maybe? But that's a huge strategical risk because the c6 pawn would be very weak. Okay, he's going for it. What's wrong with just pawn takes? Like en passant? Pawn takes back and then knight e5. Maybe he wants to go queen e6. That would be an ugly endgame, but it is an option. No, I don't think so. I'm gonna take on c6 with the tempo, attacking e7 with the check. Yes, I understand he attacks here, but I'm the first one. Once he plays rook somewhere, he cannot go to c8 because of knight e7 check. Then I'm gonna just play a4. Okay. Something else. Takes, knight e5, queen e8, just to protect, because he absolutely has to protect f7. Then I can... Yeah, here if I take on c6, he can take on a4, but I can just play a4 first myself. Then the pawn is hanging. Yeah, maybe he's arguing just rook c8. Because sooner or later, if I exchange a lot of stuff and the center is going to be opened, then my king might get in trouble, so I have to be quite careful with that. I, of course, have an option just to play queen back and say that this pawn is now weaker. So knight e5 would come with a bigger effect, let's say, but I also quite like taking it. Maybe he wants to play b5 then. Takes, knight e5, queen e8, I play a4, he plays b5. He wants to really desperately open up this a file and to play rook a2. So maybe I don't play a4, I just play a3, so that the pawn is still hanging, and b5 I can just take on c6. Yeah, I feel like I have to take. That's so much more active than going back. I actually never want to go back. Sometimes it's wrong, I understand, but in general, I like the principle of never going back voluntarily. Like, if you have something active, if you can go forward, please consider it first, and only if nothing active works, then consider those backward options. Alright, so always try to avoid this mistake of not starting with the most active opportunities. Checks, captures, and threats. In this position, for example, I don't have any reasonable checks. The only one is queen takes f7 that blunders the queen, and I don't have any good follow-ups. I don't have any captures, but I can create a threat, actually a double threat here. Knight to e5 attacking both the, even triple threat, attacking both the queen on d7, the pawn on f7, and the pawn on c6. That is huge. I have to admit my opponent plays pretty good this time. Normally I'm amazed with how stupid the chessboards are playing, but this time it's very reasonable play from my opponent. I still have the advantage here, I believe, but he's not collapsed by any means. Okay, let me play a3. Now I want to say that my opponent has a huge weakness here on c6. I have a lot of active pieces, and he doesn't really have any counterplay. Yes, I have some strategic risk that sooner or later somehow the position is going to open up, and then my king would be in trouble. But it's not really realistic. So many lower-rated players, by the way, making a mistake of having this fear of some unrealistic things. And so to avoid those unrealistic things, they start to make some weird moves. Like they are afraid of knight h5 here, so they voluntarily play g4, which further weakens their position. That wasn't necessary. Okay, rook d6 somehow uh, shouts at me that e5 could be an interesting option here to fork those pieces, but I need to get rid of the knight first to make it possible. So knight f7, queen takes, and let's say e5 here, or queen takes f7, king takes, and then e5. It's actually just an exchange. Let's say he plays rook d5, I take the knight, he takes back. I haven't won anything, and I have the situation where my bishop is very stupid. So I don't like that. I can play rook c1 instead and put more pressure on that pawn. And if he plays rook c8, I can even play d5, because now the pawn is pinned, and I achieved that goal of opening up this bishop, which I really want. If he plays c5, then I play knight c6, and then e5 is coming. I like it. If he doesn't play rook c8, then I'm just attacking the pawn. I'm creating a huge threat, which is not that simple to deal with. Yes, at any point he can play b5, but it's like never a problem for me. I just step back, and that b5 move would make the c6 pawn even weaker. Okay, that is something I have not considered, but why is it a problem for me? Like, he's going away from this diagonal, I still have some squares to go, for example rook c2. What is the problem? I don't really get it. Like, you always have to think about your opponent's idea. Don't assume he's just stupid and he's making something weird. But I cannot believe that it can be a problem. Yes, okay, he might argue that I don't have that many squares, but I do have some squares, like c3 here. At some point, that would actually be a factor here. If the knight disappears, I might start thinking about some opportunities, like sacrificing my knight, opening up the diagonal. Okay, I see his point. He's saying that e4 pawn is going to be hanging. If I take on e4, on c6, he's taking on e4. And then I don't have, like, I need this one more tempi to play d5 and create the checkmate threat, but my queen is hanging. And if I take the knight on e4, he takes back, I play d5. Now he cannot play bishop g7 because of queen takes g7. So he cannot play e5 because of en passant. So he has to play f6. Well, I do sacrifice in exchange. At the end of the day, maybe I have queen f3. How do you defend this rook? Actually has pretty much no moves. Maybe you go to e1. Yeah, more or less that works. Alright, I feel like this position has to be good for me. Maybe just queen f3. Preparing the move d5, preparing the move... Yeah, knight c6 wouldn't be really a threat because my queen is no longer attacking the pawn. d5 now, he's gonna just take it. Pawn takes, knight takes d5, and once again I'm not in time to somehow remove magically my knight. Yeah, I feel like queen to f3 is just consolidating my position, and I still have all of the threats coming. At some point d5 must be... Okay, now he goes back to stop d5. Actually very interesting. So now if I play queen c3 back, he plays rook e6 back. How can I make progress? d5 now? Probably an unnecessary sacrifice. I feel like playing rook f1, because that would attack that f7 pawn once again so that the knight is frozen. And then I might think about some ideas like... Well, first of all, now knight f7 ideas become possible again. Queen takes and e5. But not sure once again I'm getting enough. Although the c6 pawn is hanging, so I cannot play rook d5, rook takes c6. Would be coming... Yeah, probably I have to take the knight first. But that is a much better version. And if he plays rook e6 instead of rook d5, then yeah, I don't really get anything special. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get a $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. Okay, that is another reason for me to play rook f1. So I'm shuffling these rooks here to find the best position to create as much difficulties for my opponent as possible, but feels like a good strategy because I'm the one in the driver's seat. My opponent has no counterplay. He is trying to deal with all of my threats without actually having any chances. G5. I don't like this move because it gives me another opportunity to gain even more space. Like play h4. He has to go back. He doesn't have any squares here, and then I play g4. I'm threatening g5. f7 is still hanging. Like the moment your opponent starts to make a lot of moves with the same pieces, for example, this rook on a8 is not participating in the game at all. It means that so far on this part of the board, I basically have an extra rook because my rooks are both active and his rook is not doing anything at all. And you want to use that momentum because it's not going to be like that forever. Yeah, probably he wants to play g5, but that would create another weakness. And by the way, I can even play bishop to e1. Yeah, bishop g7, but what about the f7 pawn now? Just g5, knight h5, knight x7. Maybe he argues the d4 pawn is hanging. g4, knight h6. Yeah, I cannot believe he can survive all of that. I think it's time for me to go on. Here is everything protected, and I have a way to attack it. I like it. Knight h5, I suppose, is the move. Although knight d7 also makes some sense. Okay, knight h5. Now d5. And then knight f7. Or knight f7 immediately. Yeah, but d5 he takes, knight f7 he has d takes e. And my queen is under attack with a check, which is not great. Yeah, let me just take. I can never be bad here. By the way, I'm also, what am I talking about? I'm also attacking the rook. So bishop takes d4, I'm just taking on d6. Yeah, that is just winning here. Okay, just knight takes d6. What's wrong with that? Rook f8, I can even play knight f7 back. In the worst case scenario, I'm going to lose that knight, but I'm still a full exchange up. Yeah, let me just, here there are no checks. So that is how it normally works. If you build your initiative, you have developed all of your pieces, and your opponent is not doing that. He's making a lot of moves with the same pieces. Sooner or later, you start creating those threats. And be sure to use your initiative. And that is another mistake so many low-rated players are making. They're not using their initiative properly. So try to be active. Try to improve your pieces as much as possible, and then try to make advantage of that. Okay, now I feel like it's time for e5. It's opening up my queen, it's attacking the c6 pawn. Maybe he has some rook f8 ideas, right? Attacking my queen, and if I take on c6, he has queen g4, and my king is in trouble. I don't like that. I have to be quite careful with it. Once you get some material advantage, another common mistake is to let your opponent create huge counterplay. And then, yeah, that could be very dangerous. I like the move queen h3 here, though, because that's dealing with the threats. And if he exchanges the queens, I'm always happy. Like, if you have more pieces than your opponent, especially you want in general to exchange the pieces, and especially you want to exchange the queens, because without the queens, it's so difficult to create any problems for your king. It's much more difficult. And if he goes away, then I can just place my queen on g4, protecting this key central pawn, and of course still controlling that diagonal. see any real problems he can create for me. The knight on h5 has no moves to go. d5. Okay, that allows me just to take it. Bishop takes b2. I can even take on d6. He doesn't have any checks, so that feels reasonable. Yes, I understand he wants, in general, to open up the position so that he can create some counter threats. But his king is not that secure either. If I'm gonna be able to open up the files here, the knight on h5 is not really participating. That could be dangerous for him as well. Well, d5 is also somewhat reasonable because that prepares the move queen e6 with an idea to exchange the queens. Helpful. But I believe in my power. I believe that if all of my pieces are active, the position is opened, and his king is quite vulnerable, I should be able to create some difficulties for him first. Okay, he is not taking the bishop, but now I can take his bishop. Maybe he wants to play knight g7, but that can never be dangerous for me. The knight is going back. Yes, it's quite a useful defensive piece, but it's not creating any threats for me in the attack. Great. Do I have any alternatives? Bishop f6? Yeah, I don't think so. He can just take it. Otherwise, yeah, not really. Let me just take it. Knight takes. I don't think any other move makes sense. King takes. Okay. He wants to leave his knight here to be able to, you know, get some checks going. But I guess I can just double along the f file, and even rook f7 is a reasonable threat, because the endgame would be much, much better for me with such an active queen. Weaknesses alone here before, that doesn't make any sense for me at all, because I had this weakness on a3, and now he's allowing me to play a4 and have a protected passer that can never be bad. The question is, do I play rook f7 first? I guess I do. Why not? I think it's just within. So remember this principle: if you have more material advantage, it makes sense for you to exchange the pieces. Like if you have 10 pieces against 9, you only have 10% more pieces. But if you have just 2 pieces against 1, you have twice as many pieces as your opponent. So that is a huge difference. Of course, you don't want to randomly do it because you can lose your advantage in the process. But if you have a normal way to exchange the pieces, that has to be good for you. Okay, queen d7 check. I feel like I might just win this rook. Some variations. For example, king g8 wasn't possible. But now I can just play queen to d6 check. How do you save the rook exactly? Maybe king g7? Right? But now I can play queen e5, and then either you lose your rook or you lose the c5. Both are great for me. This knight on h5, absolutely useless. I mean, this is the type of piece you always have to avoid in your games. Like, you don't want to have any unemployment going on in your camp. You want every single one of your pieces going, like, working for you, doing something useful for you. Okay, now let me finish this game fast to make the final conclusion. Just taking here with the pawn, that creates a check. Okay, now checkmate is coming. Queen to e7, king to g8, and finally we are given this checkmate. But you have noticed in this game that we followed a perfect system throughout the whole game. First, we have controlled the center. Second, we have developed all of our pieces. We have made sure that our king is safe, and then we started to once we brought all of the pieces, we started to take advantage of that, going into the center, building some initiative. Be very, very careful with our opponent's threats. Remember, that is one of the most common mistakes so many players are doing. Like, whenever your opponent is making a move, stop thinking about all of your ideas and try to understand what is his idea. We were careful about that, and that allowed us to build our momentum, build our initiative, and then, very important, to use it in the right moment, which we also did. And in the end of the day, we have delivered a beautiful checkmate here. If you want to dive even deeper into what makes a very good game of chess, in this video I have prepared for you another game. I'm playing against a stronger bot, but you're going to learn so much how you can implement those plans in different types of position and, of course, beat your opponents as a result of that.